Hi, my name's Paul Grogan and welcome to episode 48 of the Gaming Rules podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Isaac Childres to talk about Founders of Gloomhaven, which is on Kickstarter right now. If you've got any comments on the show or wanted to add something yourself, then please post onto the YouTube comments or on my BGG guild, which is guild number 2258. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So, without further ado, welcome back to the show, Isaac.
Hello.
So I say welcome back to the show because I had you on previously when we were talking about another little game that you've designed that nobody's heard of called Gloomhaven, I think.
Right, yeah. It was a while ago. I mean, the Kickstarter was a while ago.
It was a while ago. Yes, it was a while ago. Although, of course, Gloomhaven is still riding high at the very, it's high on the hotness list because everybody's, still talking about it and still playing it, which is great.
Yeah, it's been pretty great.
I mean, you obviously had some idea of how good you felt the game was, and the people who you would have play tested it with early on would have obviously fed back that it was really good. But did you ever expect it to be this popular?
I mean, no, not quite this popular. I don't know. Yeah, it's like I expected a lot of people to like it, but just the extent and the amount of people that it has resonated with, has been a little surprising.
Yeah. And we played session number 20 yesterday, I believe. And the little Facebook discussion group that I have for our group where we arrange when we're meeting next, the messages this morning were, that was one of the best sessions we've ever played, if not the best one.
Nice.
The game is just, there's a number of people who've said, does it not get boring after a while? Well, we're 20 games in and yesterday's session was close. Without giving any spoilers away to anybody, we had to protect something for the scenario, which had a certain number of hit points. Halfway through the scenario, their hit points went down to 1. and it was so close. And then even right at the end, 2 of us were on our last turn. And we had this amazing combo set up. I was going to do something, and then the Spellweaver was going to do an Impaling Eruption, and I'll kill 3 of them. And then one of the monsters managed to go first and disarm the Spellweaver, and it was like, right. How are we going to do this? And then everything else just came together and we just about managed to do it. But another fantastically tense session. Anyway, forget about Gloomhaven. Let's talk about Founders of Gloomhaven. Now, I invited you onto the show because it's on Kickstarter right now, but the Kickstarter campaign's not doing very well, and I felt that it needed a little bit of a boost. So this is my English terrible sense of humour. The campaign's going absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
Where are we up to at the moment, at the time of recording?
It's about 300,000.
So this has been recorded on Monday afternoon. I'll be editing this hopefully and getting it out tomorrow. And the original goal for this was 50,000.
Yeah, so
600%. And that's a real, a number of companies put an artificially low target on it so that they can say, 500% funded, and it sounds good. Yours is 600% funded, and the 50,000 was a real target at the start. Again, going back to my question about Gloomhaven, did you ever expect it to be as popular as it was? Did you have any idea that this would have got to this stage in such a short period of time?
I don't know. I didn't think so necessarily. I mean, I guess I entertained it as a possibility, just because Gloomhaven is so popular that, I have a large fan base. But I wanted to make it clear up front that, this is not an expansion to Gloomhaven or anything like that. So I wasn't really sure how many people would follow me to this project, which is very different, but, just set in the same universe. Yeah. I was very surprised at the number of people who were, very gung-ho about the project and jumped on it right away and are really excited about it. So, that's just exciting to see. When other people are excited. Yeah,
I mean, there's a few Facebook groups that I'm a member of, and a couple of them have, people have been asking the question and said, so what is this Founders of Gloomhaven stuff, and why are people jumping on board and backing it? Has everybody played it and it's really, really that good? And I replied to them and I said, well, I think very few people have played it. I mean, obviously you've taken it to a few conventions, and things like that, and you can play it on Tabletop Simulator, but compared to the number of backers the game has got, I'd be surprised if 1% of those people have actually played the game.
Yeah.
So it begs the question as to why they're backing it. And my answer to them was, well, you've proved yourself not only as a games designer, but also as a publisher with, you know, the level of communication that you have with your backers, the way that you look after everybody, and the way that you run a campaign. You've built up so much faith and trust with the public and, you know, and consumers and purchasers of board games. And the Gloomhaven universe as well is a bit of a hook that I think most people have jumped on board and said, well, look, I know this is going to be good. Without even, you know, a lot of them have probably backed it without actually looking in that much detail at the game itself. So, you know, that's a great thing that both the Gloomhaven brand and you know, you as a brand is popular enough to garner that amount of support on the game.
Yeah, and I hope that, you know, that faith in the end is justified and that people enjoy the game.
So before we go any further, just tell us a little bit about what Founders of Gloomhaven is in a nutshell.
Sure. So it's a city building game, very Euro mechanics. I mean, you've got sort of an action selection system through like this hand management of cards. And there's also like an auction mechanic and a little bit of like a worker placement aspect, but the worker placement aspect is very small. And so you're essentially playing actions to do various like tile placements on the board to build up these resources and combine these resources into different resources. And then everyone around the table, as you play an action, will get to follow that action. But it's very player interaction focused. Like you're all building the same city, so you've got to sort of manage each other's like tile placements out on the board and sort of work around them or work with them. And then there's also a lot of player interaction and, you know, following other people's actions, and then also just this idea that the resources that you control, like you can't really do much with them. You have to combine them with other players' resources. So there's a lot of player interaction there, sort of having to work together, but ultimately it's a competitive game and you want to be the one who gets the most points. But yeah, I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah. And when we say player interaction, just for those people who are put off by that term, including me, we don't mean that you're going around and burning down each other's buildings and killing their workers. You know, you're building on one central board, which is a map of where Gloomhaven is to be built, and you are all placing buildings and roads on this building at the same time. And the location where you choose to place your buildings and where you choose to build the prestige buildings, for example, will have a massive impact on where the others go. So there could be conflict in quotes in terms of, oh, you've built that building there, that's cut off my path that I was going to build and things like that. So yeah, very, very high levels of player interaction without the actual killing the other players. And how long does it? It's 2 to 4 players, although you're working on a solo mode, is that right?
Yeah. It's 1 to 4 players. The solo mode is confirmed.
And how long does it take to play, would you say? Once you know how to play?
Yeah, about 2 hours, or maybe even less, like if you really go quickly. But yeah, I've had sort of a lot of people play, like even after their first game. You know, the first game is like a learning game with explanation. Yeah. It might take like 2.5 or 3, but then once they get familiar with it, you know, they've been reporting back to me that it takes about 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, people have been asking me for my, you know, how complex I think the game is, and having played a few rounds of it, BGG-Con last year, and now having read through the rules and watched the videos, you know, I would say that the rules themselves are medium weight.
Yeah,
it's not a heavy game. Obviously, if you're used to Carcassonne, then it is going to be a heavy game. But it's not a heavy game. But when you first start playing, you've got this map, which is covered in squares, divided into different terrain types and everything else. And it's like, right, so you need to decide where your first piece is going to go, and that is a massive decision, which is going to have ramifications for the rest of the game. So although the rules of the game are not that complex, the decision points that you have to make, because you have so many, you know, you have a choice of, I'm going to put this on the map, but where you put it is really important. And that'll come with skill and time and experience. But what the game has already got included, and I believe you're expanding on this further, is introductory games.
Yeah.
So for people's first games, when you start playing, when suddenly you're overwhelmed by the amount of choices of where to put your initial buildings, it's like, right, for your first game, stick these buildings here, and then just play with this setup.
Yeah, that initial placement. I mean, because you might set yourself back like a little bit, but in terms of that initial placement, like you can always just take an action and put something somewhere else, like once you realize what the optimal place to put it is. But yeah, it is very overwhelming, that first game. Just in terms of like having this open board. So yeah, there are introductory games that sort of drop you into the middle of the game and then also give you a direction. Like there's sort of a strategy guide for each of the 4 players, like in the introductory game, like this is what you should be doing, like once you sit down and play, because and then if you do that and sort of get familiar with the introductory game, then that'll really help you like play the full game.
Yeah, well, I've spent today kind of, watching the videos, reading the rule book and practicing it. I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to see how it goes. I might just ask the others who are going to play tonight and say, look, do you want to go for this introductory game and we'll go from there, or do you want to go from the start? With the caveat of, this is a learning game. We're all going to put things in completely the wrong places.
Yeah.
But we will learn as we go. I'll kind of give them the option. But then I'll practice it again later in the week, and I might end up, just sticking with the introductory game for new people. I'll see how it goes. So let's talk about the game again. Tell us a little bit about the design process for this game. So when did you first start working on it, and how long have you had it in development?
So I started working on it probably around Origins of last year. I sort of remember like bringing a prototype to Origins that I didn't actually play at Origins. I sort of was hoping to get it played, but then, I don't know, some things came up. But it was actually good that I didn't play it because it was utter garbage. Like I hadn't even play tested it myself then. Like I had this idea and I just like threw this prototype together like at the last minute and like headed off to Origins. I hadn't even like sat down and see if it like worked at all, and it of course didn't. So right. But yeah, so that was sort of the starting point. And I mean, Gloomhaven and sort of the publishing of Gloomhaven takes up a lot of my time. So it's it wasn't like full-time work for a year that created this. But I sort of go back to it occasionally or often, and run play tests. Send files out to people and get their feedback, and it's changed significantly like over that time. But yeah, it's sort of the genesis of the idea was I was playing this like Flash game, like this free like online Flash game called Factory Idol, which I don't know, I guess people could look it up. It's basically you just like have this map and you're making this factory of like I don't know, various parts like computer chips and stuff, and basically you're like putting down these various like resource nodes and then like building conveyor belts that sort of transfer the resources into like resource conversion nodes. So you've got like coal, and then you pipe that into something with metal, and that creates like steel, and then you pipe the steel into something else, and that creates like an engine or something. I don't know. So that sort of thing. So that's sort of the idea behind it, is this, I guess they're, called like assembly line games or something like that. I'm not sure if they have like an official title, but yeah.
Resource conversion mechanics. It's one of my favorite mechanics ever since, playing things like Le Havre and things like that. So you'll go here and get some fish, and then you'll use this building to convert the fish into smoked fish and things like that. Anything like that, it ticks all of my boxes. Yeah. So the theming of the game, since you came up with it at Origins, was it always then going to be set in the Gloomhaven world?
Yeah, I'd say like initially, I just sort of had a generic fantasy theme, and I knew I wanted to set it in Gloomhaven, but I didn't really want to work heavily on the theme until I, actually got at least a general idea of what the mechanics would end up being, if that makes sense. Yeah, and so like initially, I think the theming was actually a little bit more like Forge War, in the sense that you were gathering like metals and stuff and eventually converting them into like weapons and armor. that you would send off to these various nodes. And it was actually sort of more granular, I guess, in the sense that like you actually had the resources on the board. So you would like place a worker here and he would generate a resource. And then you'd have to place a worker somewhere else to sort of pull that resource from one area to another to convert it. And I don't know, it didn't really work because there was just too much involved. Like it got too complicated and just took too long to do everything. So I had to sort of like pull it back and make everything a little more like not track individual resources essentially. So eventually I sort of got the idea of city building. Like it would be like when you pull back and sort of take away that sort of granular resource conversion, it sort of made it more interesting if there actually were more resources and you were sort of combining them in a bunch of different ways. And sort of city building made sense to me in that respect, in terms of, you've got a bunch of stuff and then you're not just like building weapons, you're taking like metal and leather and making weapons over here, but then you can also like take metal and knowledge and make like machinery, and then you can use that machinery for something else. Sort of give it a wider scope and set it in a city building. So I'm like, well, that works like totally and completely for like building the city of Gloomhaven. I think that would be an interesting story to tell. So that's sort of where I ended up. And then, of course, once you have that theme, then you can start sort of incorporating a lot of interesting aspects into the game that, are sort of, I think, are exciting. Just putting all the various buildings and stuff in the city that people are already familiar with. And just getting all that going.
Yeah, I mean, when I was unboxing the prototype that you sent through, I was looking through the buildings and I was saying to Vicky, who's playing in our Gloomhaven campaign, and she's absolutely loving it. So she knows bits of the world and everything else. And I said, oh, look at this, we can build the Temple of the Great Oak. And she was like, oh, cool. And it's a simple thing that, we're playing the Gloomhaven campaign and we know these buildings. These buildings are familiar to us because we're playing in the Gloomhaven campaign, and now we're going back in time, effectively, and we're building these buildings. We're playing a game which is set in the same universe that we're already taking part in. So again, going back to what I was saying earlier on about this campaign is doing very well, and I think the Gloomhaven brand on that is part of the success. If you'd have made a game about factory floors and producing chips and converting them together into steel, you probably wouldn't be at 600% right now.
Probably not.
Is what I'm saying. Yeah. So do you think that a lot of people are actually, I know you said that this is not an expansion for Gloomhaven, and you've been absolutely clear that this is a completely different game. This is a Euro game. It's nothing like Gloomhaven whatsoever. But do you think people are still going to be expecting something like Gloomhaven? Which they shouldn't be, but I think some people might still be a bit shocked.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can give as much information as you possibly can, and I think there's always going to still be that percentage of people who don't really read anything or look at anything.
Yes.
It's like, oh, Gloomhaven backed, and then they
exactly.
forget about it until it shows up.
I'll
in
be
their
honest,
door.
I can guarantee that there is one person who has backed your campaign who did exactly that.
Yeah.
And that was me. I've not read anything. I've not read anything on the page or anything. I just went, back.
Well, yeah, but also you saw the game at BGG.
Yeah, exactly. But there's probably other people who've backed it thinking that they're going to get a copy of Gloomhaven. I don't know.
Yeah.
We will see.
Yeah, so
we will see.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that. Like, for instance, like the rating on BGG, like maybe a lot of people are going to get it who don't actually like it, and then they'll go on BGG and they're like, oh, this game's terrible, and give it a 1 or something, and that'll be sad.
So moving on to a couple of questions from some other people. So the co-hosts that I have on the show now and again, Tom Heath, who's done a video for Founders of Gloomhaven, which I watched yesterday. So he's wondering if this question is a little bit spoilery, but he remembers reading something, and I think you put it on one of your blogs, that you're going to have a kind of Easter egg thing within all of the games that you produce that's part of some bigger story. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I might have I might have changed my philosophy on that a little bit.
Okay.
So, definitely, like in the Gloomhaven expansions, there's going to be sort of lots of secrets and secret stuff that might come together like over the course of
the next
a few
10 years.
Yeah, a few years or whatever.
Yeah. Just one thing before you go any further.
Sure.
Just remember that I'm older than you.
Okay.
So whatever secrets you're going to share, please make sure it's all wrapped up before I disappear rather than before you disappear. Okay? Okay.
Sure.
Right.
I'll try.
Carry on.
But yeah, I mean, and Gloomhaven just is more about like discovering secrets and stuff like that.
Yes.
So, with these sort of Euro games that I want to sort of keep designing in the Gloomhaven universe as well, I want to just, I don't want to, if it makes sense, like I don't want to give people like too much incentive just to get it just for the sake of like secrets that they'll find like in Gloomhaven, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like there's going to be some crossover, and obviously like there's a lot of crossover in theme, and like if you play this game, you'll get a lot more information about sort of the history of Gloomhaven. I think that's interesting. But in terms of like, so like Easter eggy type things, but in terms of like, I don't know, like bigger sort of component story wise, I don't know what I'm saying, but
okay, we'll see. It's not that I'm going to get a piece from Founders of Gloomhaven, put it over a particular thing within a Gloomhaven scenario, and it'll give me the coordinates to where you've buried a treasure chest in the middle of the Pacific. It won't be anything like that, for example.
Right.
That's a shame.
But there might be something like that, in the Gloomhaven expansion.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so Tom was also talking about the Savas and especially the Cragheart. He's got his favourite lore and backstory that he's ever seen. Is there any inspirations for this? And he wants to know if it's going to be expanded into novels, movies, fidget spinners, or branded tea towels. I think he just likes the Savas.
Well, I mean, definitely branded tea towels. I mean, I think that's the number one priority.
Definitely branded tea towels.
I don't even know what a tea towel is.
Oh, okay, it's what you dry your dishes with when you've done the washing up.
Oh, okay.
What do you call them in America?
So like I guess a hand towel, or maybe a kitchen towel.
Yeah, kitchen towel.
Okay.
Yeah, we call them tea towels. And I have no idea why we call them tea towels. we could be here all day with this. So, okay, so Cragheart branded kitchen towels on sale at Essen this year.
Absolutely.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, so Savas. No, yeah, Savas are great. And the inspiration, I don't know. Like, I don't even remember, honestly. It was like but they started as sort of a race that was designed to get out one of the spoiler races, or one of the spoiler classes. Okay. So that was the first class I designed for the Savas, and then the Cragheart came in like during the Kickstarter. Actually, I designed him during the Kickstarter. It was sort of like there's this race of like highly like adept magical creatures that live in the mountains, and they're made of rocks, and they like study really hard and focus on mastering these elements. Yeah. And then just this idea came to me of like, well, what if one of these guys like flunked out of this school, essentially? Yeah. Right. And so he's like the Savas reject, and so they like crush his chest so that he can't ever learn magic anymore, and they send him off to exile. And I don't know, that was just a really cool idea to me, and so I sort of started exploring that more. And yeah, the Cragheart ended up just being this really cool class where he can't really control his powers, and so he's always damaging people around him, and he's just really angry about it and just punching people and throwing rocks around, and yeah.
Yeah, and that was my character for the first 17 adventures. He's now retired, and I've now got a new character, but I did like playing it. Initially, I found it tricky. Yeah. But then when I got used to it, and there was a couple of key cards that I got in the deck, by the end, I just absolutely loved playing him, and it was a shame to retire him. But these things happen. These things happen. So, have you found designing harder since the success of Gloomhaven because of the expectations that people have now?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. It was right. So Gloomhaven is just massive, right? And it's super successful, and everyone loves it, and that's great. And I'm very, very happy for that. But sort of while that was happening, or after that happened, I sort of thought to myself, like, where do I go from here? Like, how do I follow Gloomhaven? How do I top Gloomhaven? And I just decided that
you don't.
I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay. I'm not gonna try and make like a 40-pound box of like more stuff. I wanted to just go back to like making a Euro game that was solid and great and fun to play, and nothing like too audacious or crazy, just a standard Euro game that people would enjoy playing, and not really expect sort of a world changing, hobby changing product, I guess.
Some questions in from Matt Evans, who does the Creaking Shelves written reviews, and Matt, I'm going to be seeing Matt this weekend, actually, in 4 days time, and I'm going to be showing him the game. So he wants to know what makes Founders of Gloomhaven a Gloomhaven game beyond the title.
So I think like he's asking like how strong is the theming, essentially. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly strong in the sense, that's you have all these races, and the races or the resources that these races are controlling are very thematic. The Savas control the stone, and the Vermlings who come in from the forest control the wood, and then you've got like the Inox who are very like livestock heavy, and then the people. There's just a lot of people, so they control the population, and then they all have special powers as well. That's very tied into their race as well, and then you've got all these prestige buildings that are very thematic, and you recognize from the world as well, and all of them have powers that sort of tie into the buildings that they are. So yeah, I mean, like we talked about before, the theme was injected into the game like fairly early, like as soon as I had the core mechanics down.
Yeah.
And so I think it ties in really well. I mean, in the end, it is a Euro game, so in some sense, it is like a crusty cube pusher, as the Brawling Brothers say. But
well, as you say, that each of the races has a special power, and that power is not just a random one that you stuck on there. It's tied into the actual race itself, so you can see that in there. And the same with the prestige buildings. The pub does things that a pub would do. It's not just random things. So connected to that, what do you consider to be the essence of the Gloomhaven setting?
The essence of the Gloomhaven setting is...
He's good at these questions, isn't he?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure of the question. Like, it's just that world. What?
Yeah, the world. What makes Gloomhaven... If you were to describe what is the Gloomhaven setting, the way I'd describe it to people is probably, well, it's fantasy, but it's unlike any other fantasy that you know. It doesn't have your stereotypical elves, dwarves, and things like that. It has a whole bunch of unique races that are all very, very different from anything that you've known of before, and it has it's high fantasy rather than low fantasy, because you have wizards and you have spells and you have things like that. But it's a kind of, I don't know, it feels like a real place. The amount of lore that is out there at the moment, which is not much, compared to role-playing games, for example, but it's enough that the world feels like a living, breathing, and evolving place. Certainly with the way that the Gloomhaven campaign runs. Obviously, this is not a legacy game, so this is not an evolving game, but it adds to the history. So there we go. That would be my answer.
Yeah, well, I think that sounds good. Yeah, I mean, it's a unique fantasy world that, I think because of Gloomhaven now has a sort of history behind it, or, people are invested in it, right? And they sort of know the world and are familiar with various things in that world. And so any sort of Gloomhaven game built around that world is going to have those same familiar things in. So, if you play like one game to the next, then you develop a familiarity with that setting, which is very specific and has very specific races and events and all that stuff.
Can we expect to see more games from you that exist outside of the Gloomhaven setting, or is it Gloomhaven now? Is that here to stay?
Well, so I think in terms of like my company, Cephalofair Games, I think at least for the foreseeable future, I sort of want to focus on Gloomhaven games specifically. Just because I'm really excited with the world and I want to keep exploring it, even if it's not like a Gloomhaven expansion, like Founders of Gloomhaven, like any sort of Euro game I design, I sort of want to explore the worlds. I mean, unless the theme doesn't make any sense. Like for a while, I was sort of working on this sort of alternate dimensions game, like set in like a scientist lab where you were working with like the mirror image of yourself that was very weird. And I don't think that, just as an example, like I don't think that would really work in the Gloomhaven setting.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean like I won't be designing not Gloomhaven games. So, I can't really say much, but I have been sort of talking with other companies about doing some sort of side design work. So working outside of my own publishing company, and obviously those anything I did outside of Cephalofair Games would not be Gloomhaven themed.
Mm-hmm. So the company name is not changing to Gloomhaven Games then yet?
Not yet.
Maybe in brackets after the name. So, okay, so that's all the questions we've had in from Matt and Tom. Was there anything else that you wanted to add yourself on this? Anything that you think we should have covered that we haven't?
I can't think of much. I mean, I just want to say I had to come on and talk to you because like I know the last couple of your podcasts you haven't mentioned Gloomhaven, and we have that sort of whole deal, where I'm giving you the diamond encrusted helicopter, and so I'm just
I've broken the contract.
I just got to keep you back on track and make sure that you're talking about Gloomhaven every episode.
Well, it's definitely been mentioned in this one, and it will definitely be mentioned in the next one, because the next one I'm going to be recording it at Manacon with Matt from Creaking Shelves, probably after we've played Founders of Gloomhaven. So it's definitely we'll be back on track after the next one. So so for those people who are interested, the Kickstarter campaign is still live. If you are listening to this in the month of July, when's the date where it'll actually end?
August 10th. Which is a Thursday.
August 10th, 2017, which is 4 days before I fly to Gen Con.
Yep, right before Gen Con.
Yeah, so right before Gen Con is when the Kickstarter campaign will finish. So obviously if you listen to this podcast after that, then the Kickstarter campaign will have already been done and dusted. But if it's anything like Gloomhaven, then there'll be this game will be available afterwards, I assume.
Yes. So I'm not sure.
There'll be a retail release.
Sure when exactly it's gonna come out and deliver to Kickstarter backers and hit retail. But
no. But we're not saying that back it now, otherwise you might never get it.
Yeah. So what it says on the Kickstarter is January, and I think that's a very reasonable date. I'm like 99% sure that I can get it out by then. So if nothing else, then by January, it should be hitting retail shelves. And I don't think we're going to have a Gloomhaven situation. If you back the Kickstarter, obviously you'll get your game. And if you haven't, then you should be able to find it in retail. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you say January, but once we hit $1 million on the Kickstarter and we go for full 3D sculpted buildings, that's probably going to push it back a little bit.
No, I'm not doing anything that's going to super delay the project. Mostly what we're just waiting on now is artwork, which is sort of frustrating because it's like I don't have a lot of stuff to show people like during the project. It's like we're going to have more artwork. I can't show it to you yet because we haven't done it, but it'll be there. But so we're just waiting on artwork, and I think we can get it out by January.
Yeah. So I'll be putting links to the Kickstarter campaign in the show notes if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're just listening to this podcast and you want to find it, then just do a search for Founders of Gloomhaven on Kickstarter, and you should find it. And as I say, it finishes on August 10th. If you're interested in it, go and have a look at the details, and see if it's the kind of game that you'd like the look of. And that's about everything. So thank you very much for coming on the show and giving your campaigner the boost that it needs.
Yes. Yeah.
Lols, maybe not.
Well, thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure talking to you.
And I will be seeing you at Gen Con.
Yes, absolutely.
And then then I can show you the details of the game that I've been working on for the last 10 years and realise why I'm no longer going to carry on working on it after you've come up with Founders of Gloomhaven.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, it was a semi-cooperative city building campaign with resources where one resource chains into the next one and players are collectively building on one central map. And yeah, basically you designed my game for me. So thank you for that, because I was never going to get it done.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. I think we talked about that at BGG Con as well.
I think we did, yeah.
And after we talked about that, I very specifically requested for something in one of the human, or the image of the humans, like on their player mat. I think you should look a little closer at that. Yeah.
Okay, I will.
Sort of
on the player mats that I've currently got?
Yeah. Well, it's just a sketch right now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll go downstairs and take a look, because I'm going to frantically I'm learning the game this afternoon, ready to take it to the games club tonight and teach it people for the first time. So we will see how that goes. So anyway, thank you very much for coming on the show, and I will speak to you soon.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
And that's the end of podcast 48. So thank you again to Isaac for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the interview about Founders of Gloomhaven and various other things about kitchen towels. My next podcast will be recorded, as I mentioned earlier on, at Manacon this weekend. So I won't be able to get it edited while I'm away for the weekend, but I'll be doing that next week when I return. I'll be talking to Matt Evans from Creaking Shelves about some of the games that we've been playing at Manacon. So thanks very much for listening. Thanks as always to the sponsors of the show, Games Law, the UK's largest specialist games retailer at gameslaw.com. Thank you to Jason Shaw at audionautics.com for the Gaming Rules theme tune and the music used in this podcast. And Gaming Rules is now a proud member of the Punchboard Media Network. If you want to know any details of the other people who are involved in this network, then please check out punchboardmedia.com. And also, Gaming Rules is a proud member of the Board Game Trading and Chat UK Facebook group. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.